Can you hear me?
Mm-hmm.
Morning.
Hi.
What's up? Look at your plant.
No plants.
The whole forest back there.
How are you doing?
I'm good. I'm good. I've actually woke up pretty early this morning. I think like nine-ish. Um,
So early.
right. Actually, for me, that's yesterday. Let's see. I'm trying to grab the actual talk. She told me to wear color today, and I'm not at home, so all I could grab was an orange shirt.
Let's see what she comes up with.
That's the vibe. Oh no, she's totally matching dress. We already called each other.
Wow.
It's a thing. I think these talks have grown in the way that's really interesting and familiar too. I've been trying to take a little bit of distance on social media, but I saw the shares and stuff, and I was like, yo, people were like actually.
I love. Your hair is so cute like this. Oh, thank you, girl.
Oh, it is.
Appreciate you. Wait, I forgot how to share screen. Okay, so it should say it on the bottom, but let me.
Oh yeah, share screen. Okay. Host disabled attendee.
Okay. You should be able to share now, see?
Okay, cool. Let me double check. Share screen. Oh yeah, I could. Okay. I'm not gonna share it yet. What's up, girl? How are you?
I'm good. How are you? I'm going to address in like 1 minute.
But yeah. Situation. Look at all these plants in the background.
That's what I said.
I gotta have the greenery inside since I can't go outside.
Girl, my mother went to like the nursery and dropped bread on plants, pots, all that. I was like, what the hell? But we got a lot of plants now, so I'm excited.
Yeah, I love it. Okay, so I'll give it until 12:35-ish, and then we can begin. But how are y'all? What are y'all up to?
I'm hoping that after this, I'll be able to drop my newsletter and my art letter and my website. I just have like one more thing I need to do. So that's what I've been stressing about.
Yeah, I'm ready for it.
I'm excited.
And chatting about it.
And I've been talking big shit for a month.
That is real. What about AJ?
Today's my first official day on vacation of sorts. The museum is going to be finally getting their COVID precautions under wraps. So we're going to be hopefully trying to open up the show pretty soon. Things like that. But the bookstore was a big push for me. I literally shipped out maybe like 400 or so Noah Davis catalogs yesterday. So
beautiful, just yesterday.
Yeah, it's been a lot.
I'm waiting for mine.
Yeah, yours I think left at the top of the week on Monday, because USPS, that situation it's real. It's really real. I didn't really realize how close it was to me. I kept seeing this up and I'm like, that doesn't affect me. I haven't seen any of the post boxes be lifted from my neighborhood yet, but they're definitely, you have to bring the boxes to them. Like those books, like I damn near had to put them on the truck myself. That's how bad. I was like, these have to go like today. Like they kept canceling pickups. It was a lot.
I've had some packages not show up and then like be delivered. So yeah, it's a whole thing.
It's taking me a month. I ordered some stuff from Neighbor's Skate Shop and it took a month for me to get my board. It was crazy. He was like, was calling me like, did you get your stuff? I'm like, no, I'm still waiting. It's scary.
Yeah. 2 more minutes. I love the Pantone. You can't see what I'm pointing at, but I'm pointing.
I look forward to that from whenever we talk with Ciarra. I'm like, wow, this is like a vibe. Colors get me into spaces I didn't think that
I've been trying to tell you.
He has been though.
I called AJ. I said, what color we wearing? He said, I'm thinking about wearing black. I was like, black. I was like, I'm gonna get back to you on that. I was like, I might not. I don't. You know, black is not really my thing. Not all the time. Like, but orange is the sacral chakra, and that is for like sexual and creative energy. But I've been wearing a lot of orange lately for like creative energy. So you picked the right color, AJ.
I have my orange.
We should have did it the group chat.
I know. Next time, part 3. So it looks like folks are joining, and we can go ahead and get rolling if you'd like.
Okay, cool. Let me.
So while you are prepping, I will just introduce you to, I'm sure everybody knows if they've RSVP'd, this is Ciarra K. Walters and AJ Girard. Do you like your whole name spoken, AJ?
It depends on, you know what, the other day, I think someone called me Antoine and it kind of threw me off a little bit.
Do I need to say what the A and the J are for?
We can share it.
Antoine Joshua Girard.
Okay, so you guys, when you're, for like the people who are viewing it, because like is it taking up your whole screen?
Yeah, so you can minimize in the top of your panel. So you will hear everything. If you just really want to see what AJ and Ciarra look like, I honestly would recommend taking a look, because they are, they're giving like energetic cues while they're speaking. So you can see their passion. I would suggest tapping in. But to check out the whole piece, depending on how large your screen is, you may want to hit the minimize button. But take it away.
Okay, our talk with friends. Okay, so we're gonna get right into it. Oops. There you go. AJ, do you want to talk about this piece first since you picked it up?
Yeah, and I think for sure from where we like jumped off last time, this is which was such a dope conversation. This is one that actually has grown in my life really closely. So this is Glenn Ligon. He's an African-American artist. He is really known for his relationship with like Thelma Golden from the Studio Museum. They're just like creators of so much thought. I think they were the two that actually sat together and came up with the idea of like post-Black, and which was this like kind of huge concept that happened at the Studio Museum in Harlem for this show called Freestyle, which really opened up a lot of critique so post-Black in theory is basically this idea of like artists who, after so much political conversations, just kind of wanted to be free from that. And they, not to say free from the weight of it, but just free from the idea of like Black art looks like this. And so Glenn Ligon and Thelma Golden were, besties, and they came up with this conversation. So Glenn Ligon is the type of artist that really likes to think conceptually. I say all that to say that. And so this work, Malcolm X, is really interesting. So what he did was take a coloring book, a bunch of coloring book pages that had like political leaders. I think Martin Luther King had one, Malcolm X for sure had one, and he gave it to young children, young Black children. And this is what they came up with. They color outside the lines. From what this looks like to me, I'd see it kind of almost looks like a clown makeup maybe with the 2 red dots and the pink lipstick. But for Glenn Ligon, an openly gay Black male artist, he was saying that this was really interesting for him because it in some ways like queered the image of Malcolm X. And that's a figure that in most of our eyes or in our memory is really kind of like burned as this very aggressive Black male figure, especially in contrast to Martin Luther King, who was seen as like the more docile, friendlier version of, the 2 polar opposites of both of these guys asking for like Black freedom. So this piece really sits with me because it's just, again, like he created, it's a series. So really everyone who painted or colored, he made very different variants of them. But this work is just really interesting to me because Glenn Ligon is always kind of asking those questions, like looking at things that we know very familiar, whether you've seen it in the neon sign, the America sign, that's very famous. I think in LA, we've seen it at like the Broad and other museums, but even in that way, you can see multiple variants of this. So like, I think Mocha had one where it was like on the ground. At the Broad, it was sort of facing backwards. I think at the SF MoMA, they curated theirs where it was like very high to the ceiling. So you almost had to look up at it as like an idealized thing. But I really enjoy these works because he just is, especially at a time like this, I think as we open up, I did a little bit of the protesting. I went to the protest at the LA Pride as well, just kind of thinking about who's actually whose voice is there, you know, who's actually been showing up, things like that. That's why I felt like I wanted to add this, just to kind of open up that conversation between us. And Ciarra, feel free to jump in if you feel anything towards it.
Well, I'm a huge fan of Glenn Ligon as well. Like he is a conceptual artist, and you know, he has so many pieces. Just something as simple as "I Am a Man," you know, that painting, famous painting. You know, just when you think about what that means and seeing those words, I think words are so important. And Glenn Ligon does a great job with taking simple words and making you really think about them. He has another piece at the Virginia Museum. I think it's the Virginia Museum of Fine Arts. Where it's this huge sign, a neon sign, and I think it's black, blues, and sunshine. And it's like him thinking about the blues and what that means to Black people. But when I saw it, I thought about black and blue, like Black people getting beat up or getting the shit beat out of them from cops, or white people, or terrorist organizations. So anyway, that's just like a side rant, but I
vibe with that. I vibe with that. I was thinking about that last work we had, the Kerry James Marshall Police. I think that was in our last series. It was really interesting because Glenn Ligon actually curated a show too that was called Blue. I think it was called Blue. Well, he basically organized all monochromatic colors. Like, so it was like that blur on like black, blue, what that means for us. And it was like a Black policeman. I think that's the work that we used from the MoMA in our last one. So
that's what I love. But I love what I specifically love about this piece. And I'm glad that you picked it too, because this wouldn't be a piece that I would automatically pick. But hearing you talk about it and like, you know, us kind of doing a rundown before we got on this call, it is interesting. It's like you don't see Malcolm X like this. So to see him in this lipstick and eyeshadow and blush, like, and for a kid to do that, I think it's so interesting for a kid to just say, you know, I'm a color Malcolm X. And maybe they don't truly know who Malcolm X is, but I'm gonna color this person how I want to see them. And going back to what you said, you know, that happened a lot in abstract art in the 60s with Black artists. We don't want to be defined as Black. We don't want to be defined as just Black artists. We are people. Yes, our work will always be about Black life and Black culture and Black identity because I am a Black body. But at the end of the day, do not label me as just that. So for a child to color in Malcolm X in whatever way they see them, I think that's so beautiful. And then for Glenn Ligon to be like, that's interesting. And making Malcolm X, like you had to like, you could look at it, like really look at it, because it's like, it kind of throws you off. And you're like, well, why would someone do that? And it's like, well, why wouldn't someone do that?
Why wouldn't? I love that. You're making me, okay, cool. Well, welcome back to Art Talk with Friends, because this is how it goes. And I'm like, actually, you're right. It was really, it was that vibe, I think, too, because the people would just get upset with the way, you know, again, we always want to make Malcolm X in our mind like such a radical one note thing. And it was almost like, that's in itself, I think, very cartoonish, because I don't want to like start opening up guys' history, but there, I think, was talking, especially in the biography of Malcolm X, where he was sort of, I think he was like in his earlier days before he became like the figure of whatever we know. I think he was like in some space of prostitution, right? Or he was kind of like,
well, no, he was just like a pretty boy, like
doing stuff for favor. But I think the rumors were at some points he did have sex with men. I think it was a conversation, and I didn't know there was sort of a is it also Bayard Rustin? I think the Martin Luther King kind of had like a little bit of history with that too. But these are things we don't talk about. So I think that for Glenn Ligon, like kind of highlighting all that in history in such a childlike, you know, light-hearted fashion is really interesting. And it makes me think what type of images we're creating these days that we might have the same type of protection over. You know, like, don't let someone say something about Beyonce's like Black is King or something, like, you know, there's so much like.
I feel about that on Instagram, you know.
So on the next note,
the next one, Adrian Piper. Yo, I love Adrian Piper. First of all, she's an OG. Second of all, this photo looks crazy because this is one of my personal photos from, this is at the Baltimore Museum of Art. I took this last fall. But Adrian Piper, she is a philosopher. She's not just an artist, and she's extremely smart. I recommend reading into her retrospective show at Hammer and MoMA were just like, I could not believe it's so crazy because you can't find her work on the internet. You'll find certain pieces, but you won't find a body of work from her. So if she interests you, buy her book or buy one of her books. This piece is called Untitled, was made in 1990. And what I read about it, when I saw it, it's about like, it's showing the privilege that is put on the application. I don't need to see you to know where you come from, what education you have, what race you are. You know, it's like I have a full background of who you are. I can decide without looking at you. So it's an application for employment. It's supposed to be, you know, equal opportunity for all. People don't discriminate, but what happens when you see someone's name, you see the spelling of someone's name, or you see that they're Black, or you see how tall they are, or you see they're citizens or not. Like, there's all these different questions that that in a way discriminate or gives the employer a chance to discriminate. And I thought that was really interesting, that this thing that we're supposed to be fair is actually not fair. You don't think about it. You're just so, you know, at least before I saw this piece, I never thought about it. I would just fill it out. I would fill out an application, like, yeah, I'm Black, white, and Filipino, you know, okay, yes, I'm 27, like, you know, just check things off and not really think about what someone else is how they're looking at me based off what I check off on my application. And so I really love Adrian Piper. She definitely pushes, she is a biracial woman. I think she's Black and white, and she really pushes the boundaries of race and how she has interpreted and dealt with it in her life, especially in her earlier works. AJ, if you want to say something, that's all I got.
I love you for putting this so up in my face so early, because Adrian Piper, when I saw her show at the Hammer, it was perplexing for me. I wasn't really able to honestly say I got it all.
What? Are you serious?
Yeah, I think I don't know. I think she kind of hits things that are so even triggering for me, because we were talking like, my name's Antoine, but I really hardly ever go by that because I have such a distant relationship to like my name in that way. It's actually really funny to think about this application for employment, because my mind, like, I zoomed in on that "did you graduate" moment, and it's just so interesting because it's like our relationships, education, and all these markers of success. It was so much that she brought up in that work that I was like, oh man, like I actually am not ready for all this today. It's not easy to look at Adrian Piper's work. I think
it really isn't.
It really, yeah, you have to be open to challenging yourself. So I'm going to take you up on the invitation and maybe read a little bit more and push myself over this break.
She's such a great artist. And then another thing I didn't highlight is that she drew a person, I'm assuming male, that has Black characteristics. So it's like, you don't have to see my face. You can think about what I look like or who I am just off the strength of what I wrote in my application. And that is a way how we are discriminated as people of color. That is a way that we're discriminated as Black people. Education is a privilege. You know, like graduating college and even high school is a privilege. Like where you live at can be a privilege, you know? So to have all that out on there, you can discriminate me off the strength to say that I live off of MLK Boulevard. You know what I'm saying? So that's why I really love this piece, and I really love and encourage people to look at Adrian Piper's work, because she does ask you hard questions and she makes you think about things that you look past. And I think quarantine right now is the time to be looking at the things that we pushed aside. It is the time to do the shadow work and ask ourselves these hard questions in order to move forward, because if we don't confront these questions, then we're not gonna be here. Period. You're just gonna be a zombie like everybody else. That was my side rant. Deanna Lawson, The Beginning, 2019. Ooh, so this one is, birth freaks me out as a woman. You know, like I'm 27. My body is definitely telling me that it's ready to have babies, and I'm like, no, chill the fuck out. But I like this photo because of just, it makes you kind of want to look away. But this Black woman is birthing a Black baby in the beginning. And so when I read this title and I saw this photo, I thought, the beginning, like what is automatically, if we're talking about discrimination, that Black mother probably was discriminated against being in that hospital, giving birth to her child. That Black baby will be discriminated against because it has brown skin, and it comes from a Black woman, and it might not get the healthcare that it needs, because the mom might not be able to afford it, the parents might not be able to afford it, or this is discrimination in the healthcare system. So the beginning, it's like, well, the beginning of what? Like, this is the beginning of a body that's going to be discriminated against for the rest of its life, whether it's a male or female, and just because the skin is brown. And this piece has pulled such a strong emotion out of me, because it is something. It's really scary to think about how we treat Black children. It's really scary to think about how we treat children of color, and how the system treats children of color, and how us as Black people treat our own children of color, our own Black and brown babies. Like, I think, when we think about the beginning of this innocent life is just, I don't want to say all goes downhill, but like, it's a really hard life. It's a really hard beginning. It's not a fair slate. It's not a clean slate. And I encourage people to like think about that more, especially if you are not Black or if you're not a person of color. AJ.
I gotta call my mom today. This is crazy. This has put me in. You have put me in a place. My hand, or the hand on the forehead, is just probably the most touching. This is actually really very different image from Dina Lawson than I think I've probably ever really seen before. I know at the Underground Museum they had a showing of some of her more like recent works at the time, and it is so built on like Black home and Black family and things like that. But this moment is really jarring to me actually, because as you were speaking, I'm just looking at whoever that third, fourth person is putting that hand on her head. It's sort of like asking her to rest a little bit. That to me is really powerful in itself, because it seems like what you're saying is so loaded on her mind too, I'm sure, like, right? Like, even to the physical push of pushing the baby wasn't enough. What is in store for both of their lives, I think is pretty telling in this moment. So, wow, I gotta call my mom. It's my turn. I can turn that into a moment. So physically, we're looking at an image of Erin Cristobal. She's a curator at the Hammer Museum currently in LA, but she's one of the brightest figures for me in this whole art world conversation. I've been lucky enough to meet a lot of people who have done the work as far as like predecessors, and I always enjoy what Erin puts up, the showings that she has done, introduces me to so many artists. I think her last work, she called it Home. I think she curated a show that had like Lorna Simpson in it, Carrie Mae Weems, Brian McMillan, one of his couch works, and she introduced me to the artist Corey Newkirk, which I've never had heard before. And if you guys need another artist to look at, please look at Corey Newkirk. He does a really amazing work with like the beads that we grew up looking at, like young Black girls wearing in their hair. He would turn those beads into like curtains, and these curtains sort of symbolized Venus and Serena Williams' challenge as young Black athletes, Black female athletes, how people were saying in tennis that those beads could be a distraction for their games against like their white counterparts, and how afterwards, what if those beads exploded on the ground and would give them the advantage of like tripping up the other person, and just these really, crazy stories. So Corey then turns around and makes these into like curtains. And they're really beautiful work. So Erin taught me all of that. So I just say all that to say that the figure is really important, but the artist is a friend of mine, Koshin Finley. His father is the gangster gardener. I think we've maybe heard of him before, Ron Finley. Yeah, Ron Finley. And his younger brother is also an amazing portrait painter as well. But Koshin himself paints these works, which I've been lucky enough to be inside of one of them too. That they kind of open up a world. What's really interesting for me is I can't speak to what was happening for Erin at that time, but I know being a sitter in his work for me, the process is really amazing. What he does is invite people to come into his studio. He talks to them, he gets to know them, and then he takes photos. And then these photos are something that he'll paint from as reference. And so he'll kind of blur different photos together. And looking at these things, I know the white may look like very tribal markings and things like that, but I think he's actually exploring what it means as a person of color navigating the white professional space, right? Or like whatever that looks like. And so these things actually become like survival marks, and sort of these ideas of like, we all wear our scars quite differently. And so it's just really amazing, the work that he does. I'm a fan of him. He likes to work in grayscale, compared to his younger brother who opts to do color. So I think that's a little bit of the difference between their styles. We've talked in conversation. He's sort of made mention of wanting to be in tradition to like Rembrandt and history painters. And so like all of what I just did with Erin, kind of opening you guys up to what she does as a person and is a part of his work. He wants it to be like, these are my friends. I think Jesse Williams has been in his work before. His girlfriend has been in his work before. I just really enjoy these works because you know, we're building in, I think me and Ciarra kind of jokingly talked about this. Thank you all for joining us on these talks because I think we're building in history just by being present all the time. So I really enjoy coaching for working in the now as much as possible. So that was my little break.
Oh, that's beautiful because I never heard, you know, I haven't heard much. I mean, I definitely heard about Coach and Finley, like as well, but I never got the backstory in that. What I really, especially with the white paint on her face or over her, I think you make a valid point. I'm like, what is it like to be a Black person and being in a white world, especially in a white art world, and constantly feeling like, you know, when I worked I think I've talked about this before, but when I worked at a gallery and I worked at an all-white gallery, I would have to tell myself, like, I deserve to be here, I belong here, even if I have people like fetishizing me or, you know, talking to me in a certain tone or demeanor, and I have to like question whether or not I should check you right now. You know what I'm saying? Like that's a constant thing about being a Black person in the white world. It's like, should I check you right now? Is it worth the energy? Because you don't even know how disrespectful you were by fixing your lips to say that to me in this environment that we're supposed to be professional in. So I think that clearly bringing out emotion in me, but it does bring up a good point, and I love that you pointed that out. I think what draws me to this painting is her eyes. They're so, it's a story, like I can't tell, it's just like, it's a story of strength, it is a story of hurt, it is a story of moving forward. I feel like it, overall to me, it feels strong. But it also has like this vulnerability in it. And the fact that he was able to paint that, I think it's just beautiful.
I'll tell you, when I finally saw the finished product, I kind of sat with it in awe because I'd never seen myself elevated like that before. I mean, these canvases are huge. They're not small works at all. I'm not sure the picture tells us the narrative of that. And so I think knowing that I just came from a really, really traumatic experience working inside of like white art spaces and not really being able to have my story be told, you're right. I think it is in the eyes. To connect with it is like, you're really kind of meeting someone at their moment of getting back up after being knocked down. And so I just really thought that, you know, and Koshin is more of a silent type of artist. He lets his work speak for himself. But I know really, like I said, being in one and looking at this and getting to know Erin, she does so much real work for us. I think she did have her hands on the Adrian Piper show. She's always constantly, you know, Lauren Halsey's success. Like I think she wrote in her catalog. Erin is kind of, you know, she's a leader for us like that. So I really wanted to highlight and
definitely doing the work in the community that we need as artists and in the art world, 100%.
You raised so much money during the whole Black Lives Matter campaigning. I think, you know, people were asking her, especially as a Black woman art worker, to have an opinion on what was happening. And one of the boldest things I think she said on social media, if you don't follow her, please do. She was like, I won't. Like at this time, I'm asked to do so many different things for my culture. I don't want to talk about this to people who are just now joining the conversation. And I really respect her because she recently just got on a panel with 3 other Black women to create a conversation around how these museums, these institutions, which mean, you know.
Now all of a sudden, want to use
Very
these boardrooms for like 2 years. So, I guess.
Shout out to that.
So this piece is one of my favorite art pieces ever in life. I saw this at the Guggenheim earlier this year. It was through the, I think it was called Artistic Practice was the show, where they had 5 different artists curate each floor. They had like Carrie Mae Williams, they had Richard Prince, and they had a couple other artists that are slipping my mind. But it was an amazing show. Like honestly, fuck the Guggenheim, but at the end of the day, like I said, I appreciate any place that holds art. So this piece, David Hammond's Close Your Eyes and See Black, was made in 1969. David Hammond at this time in the 60s had a series of body prints where he would cover himself head to toe, hair, skin, everything in grease, and he would make these body prints with pigments and I think graphite. What I love when I saw this piece, I think I started crying. I actually went back to the Guggenheim a second time just so I can come back and see this piece. So the left, that picture is something that I found on the internet because I wanted you guys to see it without the glare. And then the right, that photo is a photo that I took when I was there. But, you know, I don't understand why museums don't get non-reflective glass.
I was thinking that, but I wasn't going to say it out loud. I was like, it's so distracting when you can see yourself reflected back in the,
you cannot fully enjoy the Anaheim, not the Anaheim, the Annenberg Space for Photography before they closed. They had a special screen over their photos so it didn't reflect. I'm like, okay, so now that I know that that's an option, why aren't museums doing that? I know you can afford this. Like, you afford to buy this piece, you can afford to properly frame it. But I love this piece because I feel like it's so painful. It's so painful. Like, this is how I felt in the last year. I just wanted to like hide my face. I just wanted to close my eyes. I didn't want to be seen. I didn't want to see what was happening around me because what's happening around us is really scary. Like, it's sometimes it's really hard to get out of bed. Sometimes it's really hard to just think past that moment because you know what's happening around you is really scary. And so when you close your eyes and see black, I also just love the title of it. Because when you close your eyes, you see black. And what does that mean? And that can mean whatever you want it to mean, whatever that means to you. Close your eyes and see black, for me, is different than what it'll mean for you, you know? And that's why I really love this piece. And I think there's something very interesting about covering your whole body in grease. Specifically grease, you know, Black people are called grease monkeys, or what? No, that's people who work in like automobiles, right? They're called grease monkeys. But you know, like, I don't know, it something about covering yourself in grease and making these body prints is such I can tell it has to be such an experience. And for him to do that, I think David Hammons is a talented artist. I love his work, and I'm gonna let AJ talk about him because I know you got a lot to say.
Nah, I do and I don't, and it's crazy because I feel like as a person who likes to study Black art and literature, David Hammons is one of those artists. He always leaves me wanting more. I feel like I have maybe like 4 or 5 books on him, and they never tell the story all the way through. So he's somebody I think you just have to experience.
He does it on purpose.
Yeah, when I saw his work at the Sullivan Nation that he did out of paper brown bags and his own Afro hair, and I think similarly with like chicken grease and things like that, I think maybe we just talked about it as friends, but like it kind of threw me back a little bit. At that time, I thought I wanted to only see art that maybe looked like more finished, like what we just saw from Koshin or something like that. That was a little bit more like what I assumed to be polished. And David Hammons, like, I don't even know what I'm looking at that mid region where it kind of looks like a diamond. He always has me exploring the work, thinking about like those artists at that time, especially David. I really like how they just didn't give a fuck. Like, there's something really kind of like raw about their conversation for him to bring in. I think it was necessary too at that time, right? Like, he had to bring it in with the title or bring it in with the materials to be like, this is a Black person. I am a Black person inserting myself in the space. And for someone who is studying and always trying to figure out what the cues are, I think for David to just like disrupt that constantly, like, he's not giving anyone a manual. I think he's always asking you to join in the moment and to make your own relationship to the work. It's something I have to think about a lot, I feel, because it's like, you know, this conversation can go 1,000 different ways. And I love David Hammons for constantly creating space like that. He goes into galleries. Like, I think he had a show at Hauser and Wirth a couple of years ago, and he'll go reinterpret the pictures as however he feels. He'll erase the wall text and write a new one. I think that's what people always saying it's so hard to collect a David Hammons, because there's nothing about it that is craving ownership. I think one of his earlier works is like the Snowball, and people were like, so we think about, why is art important? What does it even mean? He was selling snowballs. He literally sold icicle balls on a yeah, and people
in New York.
I think there are white collectors who are literally to this day freezing those things as if they own a piece of artwork, you know, like they don't want it to melt. And what's great about David Hammons is just like, he's that type of person. Like, in everything that he does, there is sort of this trickster element. And for us to be Black and to be liberated and to not he's like always slyly escaping being bought. And so he's always slyly escaping being understood, or he's always slyly escaping like, you know, he always has the upper hand. And so I enjoy that. I've learned to enjoy that.
David Hemmings is kind of like our Marcel Duchamp, you know, like a
mm-hmm.
Black version, because it's like he makes you question what art is. And this is like a more tangible piece, but like what AJ was talking about, like the snowballs or different pieces that he has made, it's not something that you can keep, and that makes you question, well, what is art? How can he put used hair on a rock and call that art, you know, which he has, or, you know, use something with chicken bones and grease. Like when he had his show at Spiral, back in, I think it was like the 70s, not Spiral, that was the group, Jam. When he had his show at Jam in New York, that was owned by Linda Good Bryant, in like, I think it was the early 70s, New York artists were pissed. They were like, what do you mean bringing this West Coast person into our space? This is supposed to be about us. You're bringing a West Coast person that's in a completely different culture from us. And I remember like, if you could watch an interview with Linda, she's like, I remember arguing like, y'all, we gonna like, this is the show, like the David Hammond show was happening and everybody in the room's arguing about this chicken grease, chicken bones, and like, how dare you put this in the room. But she said that all these Black people were in this room, all these Black artists were arguing during his show, the opening night of his show, for hours about this. And she was like, that was one of the most beautiful experiences I've ever had, because we really got to just disagree but agree.
Exactly.
You know?
Uncomfortable. It makes you feel, I agree with you. It makes you uncomfortable. So we're going to continue just for the sake of time. This is Ciarra Gates. During my quarantine, went ham. I started reading one book a day at the beginning of it, because I just was like, well, if I'm going to have to be in my space, I might as well get in my bag heavy. And so I finally got into Ciarra Gates. I've heard of his name. Actually, let me give you guys a real honest story, because this is Art Talk with Friends. So I work at the Underground Museum. Ciarra Gates is very familiar to that conversation. He walked in. I had never seen him before. So I'm like, hey, have you been here? He's like, yeah. I'm like, what's your name? He's like, Ciarra. I'm like, as in Gates type of thing? He's like, yeah. And so my introduction to him was very much like through rumors. You hear these names, these figures, but I had never met the person. So I finally did my research and I was mind blown. And I was like, damn, I wish I could go back and not play myself like that. And that happens with me with a lot of art people. So Ciarra Gates, actually, in short, he is very similar to the founder of the Underground Museum, Noah Davis. He created a hub. He basically took a bank in Chicago. He got a dilapidated bank that looked very terrible. It did not look like this when he first was given the space. And in combination with that moment, I believe Jet Magazine or Johnson & Johnson gave him archival work. So basically all of the books that you're seeing were gifted to him. And what he did was create the largest like Black creative cultural hub that he could find. And there's someone in the chat, thank you, brought up there is a Home episode on him on Apple TV. It's a really interesting one. He digs into how literally, you know, figures of like the Mammy, the Tar Baby, things like that, he reinterprets them. And there is even a moment, if you're interested in, you know, creating a collaborative conversation, where you'll see a Noah Davis in his space, because I think he gave Noah Davis a show in his one of the works that he did in Chicago. So I just wanted to bring this up because there are spaces, you know, New York, LA, Chicago, that are so in line with what we're thinking about the underground, and this idea of like freedom space and, you know, playing off of like the Underground Railroad. Where can we be us most? You know, I just really wanted to bring Ciarra Gates to y'all's attention because, you know, the work is amazing. And so
he is. I saw him speak at the Getty last year, and I remember him. It was so embarrassing. I was like, I asked him a question. I was like crying. I was everyone
in our feelings with that.
Because I am. When it comes to art, y'all, like I'm always in my feelings. Like I was writing my art letter, like little thing, and I was like crying. I was like, I just love these artists, you know, like because I'm so thankful for them. But Ciarra, what about him? He specifically, he took, I don't know, do you know, AJ, he took a piece, I think it was like I don't know what it's called. It's where Tamir Rice was murdered. It's
The
like
fire truck.
a gazebo or
Okay,
something.
okay.
So his Tamir Rice's mother asked yesterday, like they're trying to take this down because it was causing too many riots, and it was like, you know, it was becoming a problem, and it's in a park. So Tamir's Rice's mother called Theaster and was like, hey, can you please get this and preserve this? And so he was like, yeah, we'll do it. He got a team. He drove to wherever it was. I forgot where it was. I don't think it was in Chicago, to the murder site of Tamir Rice. And he got this gazebo, or don't quote me on this, y'all. You gotta do your research. But he got whatever the piece was that that Mrs. Rice asked him to get. And I thought that was just so emotional because he was like, we have to preserve this. You know, Tamir Rice was what, 12? 9? How old was he?
Preservation word sits with me so strongly because I think the Astor does such a great job of doing, you know, the preservation. My mind went to the works that he did with the fire hose, where he preserved firefighter trucks from Chicago, which were symbolic for what was happening to people, Black bodies in the 50s, where the water hose were being turned on our children. He took that and he made that a place of reflection. And what is, again, like interesting is that we're getting a very polished image with this bookstore, this book vibe, but he in his practice will sell, I think we own one at the space too, like the tar. He'll sell the all of the stuff, the debris that, like, you know, when he found this building, it was like shit everywhere. He'll take that material and he'll turn that into art and sell that to white collectors essentially, and then turn around and use that profit to create these spaces for us. So the finesse with the Astor to me is just like unparalleled.
Yeah, he out here. He got the game on lock.
So do that research. Okay, I want to learn about this one too. So.
Harry Wilson Watrous. I don't really know how to say this name. He is not a Black painter. He is actually, I think he's white. The Drop Sinister, What Shall We Do With It? Ooh, I said with it. Oops. 1913. With it. I saw this painting about a month ago at the Portland Museum of Art in Maine. And I sat with this piece for about 15 minutes. When I don't know, something about the man's expression drew me in. I think, you know, when I was looking at this piece, this man who kind of looks like a priest, who says like the Christian as the newspaper. In the back it said, and God said, let us make man in our image after our likeness. You got Abraham Lincoln, so he freed, you know, Abraham Lincoln freed the slaves, whatever. Got this wife who looks distant, and I don't know, she just looks like she's not satisfied. You could tell something's on her mind, and the daughter knows that something's on her mind, and she's looking at her mother for answers, and the father is just looking straight at us. What I learned about this piece was that man is actually a Black man. And so when I'll go to the next slide so you can kind of see details. And what I thought about this piece, I was like, whew, this is a lot. There are a lot of layers here. There's a layer of religion. There's a layer of us being freed from slavery. And then there's the layer of interracial relationships. So here's this Black man who has the life, apparently. You know, it looks like he has a nice home. He's married to this white woman. He has a daughter, and he's a priest. So it looks like his life should be lined up. But we know, like, Christianity and Blackness are right there is not. I don't want to offend anyone, but you know, as Black people, we have a complicated relationship with religion because we know that white people use that to enslave us. And when you think about them being married, it's like this life, you're supposed to be free. You follow God. You're doing America's plan, getting a wife and having a family. But yet, look at this man. He still looks very unhappy. It's like, what shall we do with it? What do you do when you are when you're a mixed person, or you're a Black person in this white world, and when you're in a relationship with a white woman? So I thought that was really interesting, and I just really that's just my own interpretation of it, but just to break down these different layers of religion, of race, of family values, and to be in an interracial relationship, what that means, to me was why I was just like stuck on this photo, and a white man painted this, so I thought that was even more interesting in 1913. What you thinking, AJ? You're on mute. AJ, you're on mute. Unmute yourself. Yeah, your lips are moving and we can't hear you. You can't unmute you?
Yeah.
Am I back? My bad. You know why? Because I didn't want to say anything that would have distracted me from listening to you, so I muted myself. But
don't do that again.
My bad, y'all. All I can think about with this one is people sometimes ask me like how I've gotten to become so into looking at art. And if you guys, it's a very easy art history book. It's called The Ways of Seeing by John Berger. Please dig into that book. I actually bought it and I sat in the parking lot when I bought it. I think I was like 17 actually, and I read it in the parking lot. So it's a super easy read because I couldn't stop. It was bringing up so many truths, all to one that I want to introduce was the idea of like, I'm sure everybody knows the male gaze is like the concept that the intended viewer in art is presumed to be a white man. So what's really interesting to me about this is that if this male is looking directly, breaking that fourth wall with us, the audience, the assumption is that it does not look like me or Ciarra. I think the assumption that it's a white man. And it, to me, is kind of interesting because like then we play on this idea of like, you know, is Black masculinity or is masculinity of color really just a replicant of white masculinity? And like, is he kind of even toying with the idea of like, I'm in the position that you would have been in normally, or maybe the, you know, the artist is painting that in. I'm merely just kind of raising questions. I'm not saying this is the point of the work, but it is really interesting to think about, you know, this, if this was a white male in the work, I think that this would not have batted an eye for me. I would have been like, okay, normal Sunday and what I think their homes are. So yeah, you've brought up a lot of complicated placemakers in here. And also too, that Abraham Lincoln whole work makes me think about when Kerry James Marshall painted that into his works too, with just sort of like, you know, that whole tarnished history between like Blacks and white savior. So thank you for introducing this complicated one. Maybe we can continue it in what's the next work?
Elizabeth Catlett to Mary, 1992, baby. It's one of my favorite works because it is a dark work. To Mary, I saw this at the National Women's Gallery or Museum in DC.
I love that place.
Yeah, I know. I love that place too. I'm sorry, I'm butchering the name right now. But I saw this piece and I shook. Like I just felt like that type of reaction, which I rarely have with art, because you know, when we look back at the other painting, we think you have the opportunity to think about interracial dating, interracial relationships, interracial marriage. So when you come back, when you go to this piece, Elizabeth Catlett to Mary, you think about what is it like to be with a Black man, especially in a time as a Black woman, you know, especially in a time where, I guess not especially in a time, because it's always been this, Black men are getting killed and been getting killed since the beginning, since we've been to this country. So to think about what it's like to marry a Black man, that fear, to have Black brothers, to have Black, you know, male friends, the fear of them dying from getting killed by the police, the fear of them running and getting shot by a white neighbor, you know, or just like getting hung, especially in the time of like this noose around this Black man's neck. And I already know though, the people who are stepping on are white people. You don't even need to see the color to know that the people who are stepping on this noose, on this person, is a white person. Because that is something we have been getting lynched. Black people have been getting lynched since the beginning of time, especially after slavery, as a way to rebel against the freedom of slaves or freedom of Black people. And so this piece is a really emotional one for me, to think about what it's like to be with a Black man. And that also adds in the complications of being Black and then trying to have love with each other. Because we are unpacking so many years, so many generational trauma with each other. And we are all that we have. So like, you know, how you kind of take advantage of your family members, you take advantage of your own people. So, you know, we say that Black men aren't shit, or we hear Black women aren't shit. And it's like, you know, what is it going to take for us to come together, for us to be like, yo, we actually matter. Our lives matter, our love matters. And then also having that fear all the time of, please don't let me get that call that somebody killed my son. or somebody killed my husband, or somebody killed my brother. You know, like that is such a scary feeling. And just to walk as a Black man or to walk as a Black woman, and not being promised of safety, just even walking out of our house, or, you know, being in our house sometimes is really emotional. And that's why I love this piece.
Sometimes I forget that we're in the conversation and it's not just the audience, because I'm like, you say things that make I was pondering. This is the last time we talked. I don't even think that I have jumped in the protest is heavy. And then my life changed, I think, after looking at all this. So it was for me a real interesting gamble of like, we were protecting the idea of ourselves, I think, for many of us. I think that's where I was at with the protesting. And so when I look at this, I see, even in the shape of their heads, like coming into one, I see a heart shape, you know, that kind of meets where the ring is. Like I see all these different things, and it is enough to really want to combat the bottom image. And even last time, I think we talked about, I know there's a moment with Charles White later in this slide, so I won't jump into him too early, but Elizabeth Catlett was one of, you know, they were at once married, and she left. She's an amazing artist. She went to Mexico. So this is a Black woman who, in this moment, she's definitely talking about issues that are really relevant to our community in America, but she was bold. She went to Mexico and she studied and she learned sculpting and different things. So this is like the bottom, you're getting a little bit of her printmaking conversation, but you can see a lot of different moments from her. She was also one of those artists that I read when I did like a book a day. And I was like, I feel like I just have so much work to do as a Black art historian to really kind of highlight Black women artists, because there's so much conversation loaded into this. So shout out to you for just giving us all of that right now. I don't even want to add anything to, you've said everything.
This is another one I picked. As Betty Ciarra, I woke up this morning, the blues was in my bed, 2019. So this was last year. It's a recent piece. And people who know are familiar with Betty Ciarra work. Betty Ciarra is like pushing 100. Is she 100? She's like in her late 90s. Betty Ciarra is an artist that did not, who has got attention throughout her career, but hasn't received the attention that she deserves. This woman has the most, I don't, like, her collection is crazy. Like the work that she's made in her lifetime is crazy. She just got her first retrospective show at MoMA last year, and she's in her 90s, which goes to show about how Black women are treated in the arts. But this piece I think I saw on Artsy. If you have that, Artsy, it's a great app. You could just look at like what artworks are on sale, and you kind of see like the prices of like how much artists are selling their work for, and then like seeing like never before seen pieces. But I love this piece because I feel like woke up this morning with the blues in my bed, like, hello, isn't that how we all been feeling since quarantine happened? Like, it's just some days where it's just really hard. And I thought it was so fascinating that she used this neon light, and then she used, looks like an actual bed frame, like one of those pull-out bed frames. And then she used these dark blue indigo bottles. And I thought, I mean, they're not really, you can interpret this piece how you want, but the way I looked at it was, I love the materials that she used. I love the title. The title is so strong. And I saw this piece and immediately felt it. I know what this feels like. Woke up this morning with the blues in my bed. Like, that's how I've been feeling this whole year. So that's kind of like my take on this piece.
I saw this work in person at the LACMA showing, and Betty, I'm like notoriously always, that's how me and Ciarra became friends. We were always at the openings trying to figure out how we can get into this conversation. And I ran right up to Betty, and she was so real, and to the point where I think the thing that I took away was like she was kind of disappointed with how small her showing was at the LACMA. It was like a room or two. It wasn't what I expected to match the counterpart of what New York City had. That's no shade to like LACMA, but I think the conversation, it shows up in so many different ways. And I was just really blown by the bottle tree, the history of like how we relate to these things as like found materials. So many artists from her generation just like created conversation from whatever they found. They didn't even have money for paint or whatever that, you know, all of that classism is relevant in the works. And then, yeah, as you said, maybe thinking about it as a bed and like sleeping on glass or sleeping on eggshells or walking on eggshells, all that type of stuff to me is apparent. So yeah, Betty Sarr is eternal. She is eternal. I think she's just it. And so thank you for bringing her into the space too. And both of her daughters are also amazing artists as well.
Artists.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So just a tribe full of conquerors. This next one is my choice. This was Archibald Motley. Let me move so I can read the titling. Stomp, 1927. So again, during my quarantine craze, I was able to read a lot of books and try to sort of do a back history. I think I actually also saw Archibald's work originally at LACMA, and they had, you remember that little store that was in the middle of LACMA before they started closing up everything? I found this book for like the low, for like $10, and I bought it and never opened it. And I finally opened it and was like, wow. So we know him from like the paintings that look very similar to the Ernie Barnes, like the grandma, I always call it the grandma art, that painting that everybody's grandmother has in their house of like the juke joint vibes. Archibald Motley was actually sort of thinking about that, I think, a little bit earlier than he was. And in this moment, we're looking at the Harlem Renaissance, and it's everything we know about the Harlem Renaissance, the party, the essence, the vibes, the music. But what Archibald Motley did that I thought was extremely important that I wanted to share with y'all today was we see that figure that's sort of round, that's bald, with the two beady white eyes. That is a Black man painted physically into the work, but Archibald actually wanted that to be a stand-in for white voyeurism. So what he felt like was at the time, you know, much like today, I just saw a snap the other day of a couple. You know, we were starting to create that trend where it was like, you know, maybe for today I'll try one. Like for me, it's me and Ciarra is like orange shirt. Like the idea of like, for me, what brings me into this is this. I saw a white couple were playing with that, and everybody was like, oh, we can't have anything, even in our like how we talk about each other. Like there's a co-op, you know? And so this is just true for 1927. Archibald is saying the same thing. Like this man is just at the party. He specifically chose to take a wall, to not be a participant, to look, to stare, to have this like really awkward freeze on him. And, you know, I thought that was interesting, though he didn't choose to paint the artist, the sitter to be white. Like, I think it was like, maybe it could be a toy of like, for him, safety, maybe. I don't know if there still was space to be so openly critical of the white male body at that time. But yeah, for him to kind of paint it as a Black man who's sort of like blurring into the party, I thought was really, really interesting. But I just wanted to share that because I know that we all have personal firsthand experiences where just like, I don't know what it is sometimes that they want from us. It's like, how you take into me, so I don't know what you're looking for.
That, you know, it's so funny, that character does stand out, but like until you really talked about it, I wasn't, you know, I don't know, that's the first thing that drew me, but it wasn't the thing that kept me. But now that you said the things that you said, I will say this could easily be a Black culture vulture, and we got a lot of those. As Angela Davis once said, there are some Blacks I do not want to unite with, period. And I think that when you think about that, like this Black man who is not participating in the party, if we're taking it from like what AJ just said, like in that mindset, this Black man who's not participating in the party, he's looking around like, who's the next big thing? Who's about to make me money? Who's about to blow up? You know what I'm saying? Who can we exploit to use their work to, because, you know, especially the Harlem Renaissance, it was so pure. It was so pure. It was so pure. It was so genuine. There was a group of Black people that came together and shared their art and made the best of their situations. And to have people come in and try to exploit that from us, exploit our art, exploit our music, exploit our fashion, exploit our bodies. And there are a lot of people that play part of that, and they're not just white people. And we know that. So I think, you know, from what you were saying, that's what it brought out for me.
Please explore Archibald Motley more. Most of his paintings look very upbeat, Black, familiar scenes, but he always puts sort of like a creeper, like a coy into the works. And that was something that sat with me because I'm like, man, I love what you said. Like, you didn't even notice him, because who does? When you're in the middle of enjoying yourself and you're participating, that's something I always think about too. Dr. Carr, so I went to Howard, and he would always say, art historians were actually asked to be like this person in that way, that we're actually asked to look at culture, not necessarily participate in it, because somebody has to preserve. And I think that that's what's really, really odd about like the Black Brown experience, is that like you're supposed to live. You're actually supposed to be in the middle of it. I don't think you're actually supposed to sit back and be the one ready to write the books about it. And that's what's really interesting about art for me, is that I don't paint, but like I live by talking to y'all in these ways. And this is like my experience of participating in it. Yeah. So that was my, go ahead.
Molly's work is so lively.
Mm-hmm.
Like if you just take away that character and not pay attention, which now it's like I can't stop looking at him. But when you
so
look at like, it's just like I feel like it's just a bad energy in the room now, you know, like that's how I feel with him. But you look to the side, like you see these people like clearly enjoy, like you could tell when you look around, people are enjoying themselves and they're living and they're alive and they're happy. And being happy is a radical act, period, especially as Black people.
Shout out to Archibald.
I think this is our last one.
Oh no, it's the last one.
Charles White. Me and AJ love Charles White. I mean, if you don't love Charles White, you wow for that. Like Charles White is an OG to the game, you know, like he really paved the way for us. Like I'm so in debt to the man. Like I love him. This piece is what made me fall in love with his work. I saw his show at MoMA in 2018, his retrospective show, which was phenomenal. Like the show that where did they have? Oh, the one at LACMA did not stand up. First of all, LACMA, it did not stand up. So you see at MoMA, I'm sorry, shade. It is what it is. It is what it is. But I saw this piece, and at MoMA they have like, you know, you can have like a little earphone, like the little walkie-talkie situation, whatever. You can listen to what the curators or whoever has to say about the work. And so with the retrospective at the MoMA, they had Carrie James Marshall narrate some things. They had the curator, I don't know who it was, narrate some things, but Carrie James Marshall narrated this piece. And Carrie James Marshall, another famous painter, who was one of Charles White's students, he narrated this photo, and what I remember correctly, you know, memory is a funny thing, but what I remember is I saw this piece and I started crying. I felt ridiculous. I was in chaps with like red lipstick at the MoMA, bawling, like all these white people around me, like just crying nonstop. I just couldn't. I just saw this piece and I was like, his eyes, when you look at his eyes and you look at the kind of like what Koshin's work does too. When you look at the eyes, you see the vulnerability. And what Carrie James Marshall was saying was like, as Black men, you see this Black boy who has to be hard on the outside, but soft on the inside, which is kind of like this show, the conch show, where it's like soft on the inside, but hard on the outside. And that's what
you're making me cry, bro.
So he said me crying, like,
bro.
he said me crying, like,
yeah.
So like that constant having to be hard and being tough, and you know, Black women, same thing, having to be, or just people in general, but I'm gonna speak from the Black experience because that's what I know. But being a Black woman, and as AJ, I know you can talk about it too, like being a Black man, it's like you gotta constantly be hard, you gotta constantly be ready to go, you have to constantly be ready to have that comeback, because you don't want to look weak, and you don't want your vulnerability to be taken advantage of. So when I saw this piece and I heard Carrie James Marshall's words to this, it made me cry, because I'm like, this is how I feel, and this is how I know a lot of my friends feel, a lot of my Black male friends feel, like having to be hard and just go, you know, being like, do this hyper masculine thing that's not even something that they signed up for, just so they don't get taken advantage of. And you look in his eyes and it tells you everything. This boy is in pain. He is in pain. He is sad. He is trying to communicate much more than this exterior that he is presenting.
Thank you. I'm looking at some of the comments pop up, and I feel you. She said these conversations have been like church, and I feel that on so many levels. I've like you, I think my relationship to Charles White was emotional when and even sitting back at it today, I'm like, damn, it's like so much work ahead of us. Because this conversation's flow is definitely not how you probably hear most white curators talk about this work. Like, it's just straight form, straight whatever, and all the cultural conversations are left out, if ever. And yeah, I'm down to take questions for sure. So when we're looking at, for me, Charles White, so I will just go back into a personal narrative. At that time at LACMA, took like maybe a group of like 10 middle school to high school age students to the work. And it was really emotional because we were thinking about how Charles White, by any means necessary, was trying to get creative conversations to our people.
Yes.
Like he was eating, calendars.
Yes.
I think if you there's the Eartha Kitt movie, he did like the drawings for their like whole intro narrative, and he was just trying to get his work like out there, much like Kerry James or any other artist that we may think about. I think we talked about like Keith Haring at one point. He's a white male artist, but just how he wanted it to be so familiar. And so when I look at these works, it does bring up a stir for me, because I'm like, this conversation, what we're having today, was like what Charles White, I'm sure, would have wanted. Yeah, for so many different reasons. And I just I'm always like, the way the shows are set up, and LACMA has such a really weird contention with like its Black art. I think it shows it frequently, but then it always, something about the way it curates or something, it just never feels very like it was meant, right? Like we never feel fully centered in that space. And I think for me at LACMA, there was a way that the sound was hitting us. So we really weren't able to even have this conversation because it was so much narrative being pushed at us. So I enjoy how we're looking at this sound of silence and just thinking about our ancestors and our predecessors in a really real way today. So nothing to be said. I'm just happy that we're spending time as a people, the 13 and 14 of us in this chat, just looking, really practicing looking. Do you want to crack into the questions maybe?
Yeah, these are our last
quotes. I'm sorry, we have quotes. Let's take turns reading them like in school.
Okay. Art can be anything the artist wants it to be. Jack Whitten.
When someone tells you can't do something, do it more. Faith Ringgold.
You can make art out of anything. Betty Saar.
Art has saved my life on a regular basis. Carrie.
Okay. Every fucking day, bro. Art just be like, okay, life is worth it. Art exists in the land of the spirit world. Noah Davis, R.I.P.
No matter how much we're shuffled around or deleted from neighborhoods, we're always here in this space, no matter where there is. Lauren Hossie.
That's the queen.
That was vibes. That was a vibe. This was our Proverbs for today. Maybe questions, thoughts, or concerns?
Thank you, guys. This is always wonderful. If anyone has questions or wants to hop in dialogue with these two, feel free to just turn your camera on if you're comfortable, or I can ask, or you can unmute yourself, I believe, or hop in the chat with a question. We could just leave that open for a few minutes if folks want to jump in.
Yeah, so down. Okay, comments. Y'all killing it. I'm mad I missed all this.
Yeah, run through that if you guys want to respond to anything.
I want to say some things too, just about what has been a good use of time for me. If anybody's looking for like advice or just a personal perspective, if in COVID it feels like there hasn't been anything to do, I would just continue to recommend like studying and maybe looking behind. I found that in that sort of challenge to myself, a book a day for whatever 30 days. You don't have to go that intense with it, but just take time reading, because I found that a lot of these artists are actually saying things that feel so relevant to me today. And it once, like what we were bouncing back and through, I'm not able to look at these images the same anymore, because I'm like, wow, like so much of my lived experience has already been, happened in front of me. So
yeah, art books, man. Art books are
we read, y'all.
Are the wave. I have a section, if you sign up for my art letter, or when you visit my website, there is a section of books, of art books that I love. I think there's like over 80 books that I picked, and all you have to do is just click on the photo, and then it leads you to where you can buy it. But I have a collection of books of different artists, that, especially Black artists, that I find important, or works are important. And there are other artists on there too, because I also, I wanted to put in that one work by a white artist, because, AJ, you and I have had this conversation before, but we shouldn't be limited to only talk about Black art, or having to just think about things in a Black view. Like I said, I'm always going to think about, my work is always going to be about Black. It's always going to be Black because I am a Black woman. But, where I'm moving at in my career is like, I just want to be an artist.
Yeah. Joshua Johnson is an artist that jumped into my mind when you were talking just then. He is a Black artist that was an enslaved, or he's a free man, but he was sort of like, his talents were like they let him paint white male sitters. So when you go to history painting rooms, like you would have assumed that the painter was white, but he was actually a Black man. And I just thought, I mean, this conversation can go back and forth. And I even think about just the fact that us as two Black people were having a conversation about a white male's practice. There is still, like, that in itself is a Black art conversation. So
people talk about our work all the fucking time.
However you want it, yeah.
I talk about it, period. Like, I miss panels too. Thank you. I miss the panels. I'm really grateful. Thank you, TOAN, for, you know, having us. Thank you, AJ, for continuing. It's our third one this summer. That's kind of crazy. Like, we've had 3, and they are necessary for me. I feel alive. I feel like I have purpose when I do them, and it's so nice to talk about something that I really just love and I just do on a daily basis.
I stopped caring about how many people, and I just thought about the intention. I always love that moment when we, in the tone of your voice or in the thought of my mind, how we kind of become a little bit more vulnerable in front of art. And I think that that's when it's doing what it was supposed to do. So I never regret these talks at all. So thank y'all for tuning in, for sure.
Yes, thank you both for letting me hold this space for y'all. As per usual, I want to give like a little shout out to folks on the call who've joined that I recognize. We have Michael Tong, who I think y'all should get familiar with. He's new in LA, arts worker, all of the above, community cultural worker. We have Eileen on the phone, Itzel, who is an artist. I saw Tyree on here a bit ago. We have Bree from Sila. We have Veronica. Like, yeah, y'all are here. So I appreciate it. We have Ray on the call, Ray Robles, and we're all doing the work. And I appreciate it. And I learn every time I speak to y'all and hear y'all. So thank you. And
thank you.
Of course, this call is being recorded, so I will upload it with capacity.
Thank you.
I love y'all.
AJ, I love you. Where is he? He's still here?
Yes,
I'm here. I'm humbled by the moment. So I'm like, this is church. Thank y'all. This is
I know, on Sunday. Hey, can I get an amen? Can I get an hallelujah?
With my orange chakra colors on. Enjoy the rest of y'all day. Thank y'all.
Thank you.
Peace.